Before we begin this video, I want us to ponder over a little question of mine. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of the word funk? Some of you might immediately run to the era of 1970s and 80s America, where the political and social tensions resulted in a vibrant culture and brand of music that was rebellious by nature. Others might reminisce about the early era of musical giants such as Funkadelic, Stevie Wonder, and Earth, Wind & Fire. Yet for many individuals engrossed in gaming culture, I'm willing to bet that Hideki Naganuma was the first thing that crossed your mind, the CEO of Funky Fresh Beats. Being responsible for some of the most influential music in the gaming industry, Hideki Naganuma is a man who needs almost no introduction when it comes to the realm of video game sampling. Even people who haven't necessarily heard his name have probably heard his extremely unique style of music that mixes samples from various forms of media, from the sweet sounds of hip-hop, jazz, pop, or funk, to the ambitious flair and delinquent edge he puts into all of his work. If I had to describe this man in one word, it would simply be iconic. His influences on the gaming industry and the music one at large simply cannot be ignored. So in this video, I will explore and analyze the impact of Hideki Naganuma and his music on the culture of gaming at large. His style and his influence have gained him a lasting reputation as a true pioneer of the craft and everybody's funky uncle. Before I start, I want to let everybody know that I myself am not a music composer, or even someone that necessarily knows music theory that well. I'm just an inspiring game developer that loves to analyze and make content about the media that inspires him. I hope by saying this, that you are all encouraged to join in on the conversation about Hideki Naganuma, and tell me about your individual experiences with his masterful music, and possibly fill any gaps of knowledge or perspective that I may have overlooked or missed. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video essay, and welcome to Understanding the Music of Hideki Naganuma.
Y'all ready to get funky?
Born in 1972, starting off with his early life, Naganuma was enamored with the prospect of making music.
Identify the beats.
1, 2, 3.
But that was too soft.
Being inspired by his older sister, he requested that she tutor him on the electone organ, an instrument that she was also receiving lessons for. So with that, the electone became the first instrument that Naganuma played in his life. It is important to note that the teachings for learning the electone differ greatly from that of the classical piano. With the electone, much more emphasis is put on learning how to better improvise melodies rather than strictly following the sheet music like a classical composer intended for the piece. Improvising is a musical technique wherein the performer plays a musical sequence that is often composed by themselves spontaneously on the spot. They often have a range of notes that they pick from musical scales, and they have to play a solo composed of them, usually in tune with the feel and vibe of the song being performed. Musical improvisation is most associated with the genre of music known as jazz, but it can also be adopted in rock, blues, R&B, and most importantly, funk. This is because all of these other musical genres originate from jazz as a root. As a result, improvising is a musical technique that requires a lot of skill and creativity to pull off nicely, and because of that, it is often the signature mark of a good musician. Also with the electone, Hideki often practiced with the presence of percussion, where he would have to play the bass with a pedal on the instrument simultaneously with one hand focusing on the chords of a song and the other focusing on the melody. Going into elementary school, Hideki was already well versed in the general ideas of how to play the electone. Because of this, he was able to reach up to grade 4 on the Yamaha grade examination scale. For reference, this scale goes from 13 to 1, with 13 being the lowest grade and 1 being the highest possible rank for a performance level. And Naganuma managed to become that level as an elementary school student. Safe to say, this guy was a true prodigy at the craft since youth. Most people in that position wouldn't even be able to get past grades 7 and 6. For him to be able to perform such stylistic musical techniques at such an early age, it most likely contributed to his good ear for picking up rhythms and samples that so greatly defined the music he would go on to create. And Naganuma seemed to carry this type of momentum all throughout his musical career in life. Going into his early teens and middle school, Hideki began to be heavily influenced and inspired by Western music, particularly that of the funkadelic and hip-hop variety. Because of the influences from his older brother and sister, he was able to gain access to a lot of foreign music. Music like this was pretty unconventional for a middle school student to listen to at the time, especially in Japan. Dubbing what he listened to as black music, most likely a huge nod to the African influences on Western music, he discovered that many Western music artists were able to write, compose, and perform their music all by themselves. He became enamored with big musical figures like Stevie Wonder and Prince. Something about the rough and gritty style of many hip-hop, rap, and jazz artists simply stood out to him. After discovering that musicians like them could start from basically nothing and build a name for themselves off of their own talents, he simply had to try it for himself. Channeling his inner rebellious spirit, Naganuma secretly got a part-time job at an undisclosed location. He did this in order to save up money for some equipment. What type of equipment was he getting, you might ask? Why, it was sequencing equipment, of course. With his newfound tools, Naganuma could start mixing and experimenting with various styles of music. This was it. Now instead of simply performing music, he could start making the music. He had now taken one step closer to becoming the iconic musician that he envisioned himself as. However, Naganuma had just one problem following his newfound inspiration for creating music. The young talent was creating all of these original mixes, but he had nowhere or no one to show it to. In order for him to grow, he had to find a place to show off his compositions to the world. So in his third year of middle school, Hideki decided to enter into one of Japan's nice guy competitions, just to start getting his music out there. This was the first time Hideki decided to go public with his musical talents. This was probably a big moment for him, a chance for him to become a true artist in his eyes. The first place winner was Isaku Yoshida. This competition wasn't strictly just a musical one. The contest was meant to serve as a platform for young talents to potentially show their stuff and make it as an idol. Specifically speaking, this nationwide contest was a huge talent show, and Hideki Naganuma ended up performing his first song ever, My Girl, on stage. He wrote the lyrics, composed, and danced the song. The fact that Hideki was barely a high schooler when he decided to enter this competition really shows the amount of passion and hard work that he had dedicated to his craft. He took this competition very seriously. But still, passion alone wasn't enough to win, facing off against such strong competition, and he ended up missing out on the 1 million yen prize, as well as the chance to co-star in a movie with famous Japanese idol Kumiko Goto. That didn't shake him up one bit though. After this competition, he was able to buy much better mixing equipment following his years in high school. It is here that he was able to refine and greatly improve upon his sequencing skills, better experimenting with different genres and techniques to grow his own unique style. But he still had the same problem. He wanted more people to hear the stuff that he was making, so he did what all great talents do. He branched out heavily. He sent tapes to various auditions and radio stations. One notable station that broadcasted him was HBC Radio, or Hokkaido Broadcasting. His work ended up impressing them so much that he became a regular guest on the show, frequently showcasing his stuff to the public. It turned out that HBC Radio had a connection to the Yamaha Corporation, a company that made musical instruments like the very one Hideki grew up with. Yeah, well, they were hosting the Teens Music Festival, a yearly event where, once again, young talents from all over the country could come abroad and showcase their skills to the public. Naganuma participated in these events for 2 years, eventually getting the opportunity to go to nationals. There, he performed at the Nakano Sun Plaza. During this time, there was a noticeable big band craze where all of the young artists of Japan wanted to be a part of some big group or fashion. This made Naganuma stand out all the more with the fact that he composed and performed his own music without the assistance of other people, often just singing and dancing to his own backing tracks. All of this, mind you, while he was still just a high schooler. Now his performances and showcases to the world would eventually catch the attention of a sound director from Sony. The director got in contact with the upcoming artist and offered Hideki a contract. Apparently, he liked one of Naganuma's songs so much that he requested him to come perform in Tokyo on the big stage. This again was a big debut for Hideki Naganuma, his chance to showcase to the world how much of a talent he truly was. He kept in contact with the director. Around his early 20s, Naganuma had been keeping on track towards his debut as a proper musical idol. Around the age of 25, Hideki was still working part-time, occasionally sending the same record company demo tapes and meeting some of the arrangers, and overall moving closer to becoming a real part of the industry. But as time went on, Naganuma slowly became dissatisfied with the lack of variation in the Japanese pop music industry. He started to become even more enamored with film music and Western dance music. This slow drift away from the mainstream music industry sadly led to the partnership between Hideki and the company not working out in the end, and he ended up moving on to new pastures. Up until this point, I've neglected to mention the type of work Hideki Naganuma was doing as a part-time job. Well, it was actually something that potentially filled that desire for more variation. He worked at Blue Note Tokyo, a famous jazz club where he performed as a DJ and bartender. This jazz club might have been the source of his dissatisfaction in the industry, as he would regularly be around guests from foreign countries who all had differing styles of music that you normally wouldn't hear in the saturated J-pop world. Having so many famous musicians visit the club from around the world definitely contributed to Naganuma's diverse taste and multicultural approach to mixing styles.
Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music. Like old times, like old times. So now I'll start the melody on the organ.
From jazz fusion to salsa, Latin, bossa nova, and blues, Naganuma had access to a goldmine of diverse sounds and genres that he could build his craft around. The best artists, after all, refine their own skills by experiencing and engaging with more art themselves. And Hideki wanted that. He wanted to make music from various styles and genres that he experienced at the club. One of the most influential artists that he looked up to at the time was that of Ryuichi Sakamoto, another famous Japanese composer/producer. He was known for his influence on film music in the Japanese record industry, but more importantly, Ryuichi Sakamoto was also known for his work making musical compositions for video games of all things. He worked on early video games like Tengai Makio, Zero, and Artificial Lives. Those early games had a known limit to the amount of quality you could infuse into the soundtrack for them. Around this time, however, video games were about to transition to CD disc instead of cartridges, with consoles like the PlayStation and Sega Saturn. These CD discs allowed for a drastic advance in sound quality for video games, as they were running off of CDs now so they could have CD level quality. You could now have more complex music compositions for video game soundtracks, like orchestra, J-pop, and vocal music. It truly was a huge game changer for the industry at large. Hideki decided to take advantage of this new boom and start making his own music for the industry, slowly working his way up to making film music as he so desired. Eventually, he came across an ad in a magazine. It was from the company Sega of all places, and they were requesting new sound creators for this recent innovation in gaming music. So Hideki sent them a few of his tapes, probably the best ones from his time as a DJ, and he was hired on the spot. Now, before we get into the big debut for his career, Naganuma worked on other Sega games like Sega Rally 2, a racing game that you might have heard of before, but I bet you anything that you've heard this song from the game somewhere on the internet. Even for somewhat niche games, Naganuma was able to elevate the surface level material to a higher polish with his creative music. His use of heavy percussion, kinetic rhythms, and strong composition of lively instruments made his song immediately jump out at you, almost speaking louder to the game's overall vibe more than words can say. He isn't afraid to shy away from more traditional sounding Japanese compositions for video games, and rather, he embraces his more unconventional style of music that was relatively unheard of at the time. While Western music in Japan wasn't that uncommon at the time, for game music in particular, it was more characterized by chiptunes or orchestral compositions. Naganuma's distinctive blend of genres stood out in this area, giving the games he worked on a more unique audio identity. And considering the fact that he was working at Sega, a games company that thrived off of the idea that they were a more different, edgy alternative to your average milquetoast kiddie game makers like Nintendo, his pairing of music with their business model was almost like a match made in heaven. Naganuma would also go on to work on soundtracks for other niche games like Outrun and Space Harrier, both games with excellent soundtracks. Space Harrier in particular having quite the familiar theme song for a Sega game. Hideki Naganuma would continue to do small-time jobs at Sega, either working for or directing the soundtracks for games they produced. This experience, of course, would eventually lead Hideki to becoming one of the head directors for one of Sega's most important games yet. At the turn of the 21st century, Sega would want to branch out more with their video games and experiment with new things while truly revolutionizing the medium. Building on the success of game hits like Nights into Dreams, Panzer Dragoon Saga, and Sonic Adventure, a young director at the time, Masayoshi Kikuchi, brought the developers from Panzer Dragoon on the Sega Saturn to work on a new project. This team consisted of less than 25 developers, with most of them being under the age of 25. And with the new Dreamcast system on the market, they wanted to create a game, nigh an experience like no other. Character designer Ryuta Ueda, being inspired by the freshness and international appeal of Sonic the Hedgehog, wanted to create something cool that dealt with pop culture and was completely unlike the team's previous work. But he too was disappointed with the oversaturated market of generic Japanese iconography, with overly done anime and manga designs for characters. Sound familiar? He also wanted to reach outside of Japan and make more realistic and gritty styles of character designs, a vastly different style to the typical game genres of science fiction and fantasy. Being influenced by the series Parappa the Rapper and the anti-establishment film Fight Club of all things, Ueda was the perfect artist to have on board for this new, groundbreaking gaming experience that was sure to submit itself as a cultural classic. Now all they had to do was find a music composer for this revolutionary game. Someone who would encapsulate the rebellious attitude and match the free-spirited nature of self-expression that this game was trying to convey. Hideki Naganuma was that guy, and in doing so, he created one of the most energetic, rhythm-heavy, defiant, and multicultural soundtracks of the decade for one of the most influential games at that time. This very important game I am talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is of course, Jet Set Radio.
Let's look at the funk. Could you stop playing with that radio, Lord? I'm trying to get to sleep. Could you stop playing with that radio, Lord? I'm trying to get to sleep. Could you stop? Could you stop? I'm trying to get to.
Jet Set Radio is one of those games with such an overwhelming sense of style and attitude that you truly cannot find an experience like it anywhere else. Did you know that Jet Set Radio was actually the first cel-shaded video game to ever come out? Sure, there are games like ZPC and other niche titles that experimented with the comic book-like aesthetic drawn over 3D models, but Jet Set Radio was truly the first game to implement the art style into a full-fledged experience. A style, I might add, that is still broadly used in mainstream games till this day. Imagine coming across a game like this. A game so bold, so unapologetic, so overwhelmingly stylish in its messaging, that it has to create a whole new visual genre just to match its own vibe. Jet Set Radio was truly an experience that had never been seen or heard before. And the most insane part is, I haven't even begun to start talking about the absolutely legendary soundtrack that Hideki Naganuma crafted for such an experience. At this point in his life, Naganuma was pretty well known in the gaming industry for his amazing OSTs, but it was this game that truly launched him into stardom, with Jet Set Radio being so synonymous with his music that people actually mistaked him as being the main creative lead behind the game. And can you blame them? This game's OST was honestly one of the most standout things that came out during this era. For a Japanese audience especially, being submerged in such a unique and stylish soundtrack that covered multiple genres including J-pop, hip-hop, funk, rock, acid jazz, and electric dance must have been such a refreshing experience for those with similar sentiments like Naganuma and Ueda. Unfortunately, whether due to the culturally conservative nature of Japanese society, or the period of economic decline known as the Lost Decade, the game did not sell that well in Japan, and many of the artistic innovations went unnoticed. It's also because of Sega's decline in the last era of making consoles. Sega was not viewed positively at this point in time by most of the public in Japan. In the West and other parts of the world, however, Jet Set Radio quickly grew a cult following. In the Western games industry especially, the game's cel-shaded visuals and urban street culture theming were pioneering and made it stand out to many diverse communities of people. It was much more relatable to those in the West because it was about their experiences. Skate culture and funk music came from America after all. This, of course, led to more appreciation of Hideki Naganuma's style of music and gained him quite the international cult following. Some of the most notable tracks he did for JSR were Let Mom Sleep, Sneak Man, That's Enough, Grace and Glory, and Sweet Soul Brother, just to name a few of my personal favorites. Starting off with Sneak Man, we begin this song off with a fast-paced synthesized violin scale that quickly builds the adrenaline that will be present throughout this piece. The slap bass and heavy percussion are really the stars this time around, as this song is going for a more frenetic and chaotic vibe, meant to match the exhilarating feeling of running away from the police.
What's going on? What's going on? What? I don't understand what's going on here.
We then get the brilliant mix of two samples, one from Mama Said Knock You Out by LL Cool J, and the other from Catch-22's Boogie Down.
I said it before and I'll say it again. Dance while
I cannot state enough how creative Naganuma has to be in order to hear the rhythmic potential in all things. He is able to repurpose them nicely to fit the vibe of Jet Set Radio and its songs. It's truly awe-inspiring. That sample section then breaks into this heavy brass and woodwind section where the flutes are oscillating in the background to create a fast RPGA or energetic tone. Naganuma uses this nicely to make the player feel more energized and alive during these tense sequences. And then comes that breakout section into the sample of the guy saying, "What's going on?"
What's going on? What's going on? What? I don't understand what's going on.
That is played to the fluttering slap bass that has now reached an all-time high as the main groove. This rhythmic breakdown section creates a pause to the frenetic tension earlier in the song and relieves the effect right before building up to that next big section. That short solo of the guy talking right before going to the main melody is an excellent cherry on top to all of this build-up. Eventually in the song, there is another semi-breakdown of the melody where there's a solo of a guy saying, "It's a tough one, but somebody's gotta do it." This could be me reading way too much into things, but maybe this section of the song could be symbolic of an inner monologue of how the law enforcement in Tokyo-to view ridding the city of the skater and graffiti gangs. I don't know. The best songs often create a narrative within their own shifts and dynamics and motifs. The very last solo of Sneak Man literally has a voice start off by shouting, as a funky solo ensues, and we get to recontextualize the fluttering, oscillating woodwind as the player now being the one in control. Almost like the later half of the song creates a rebuttal to the first half. The final bits of this amazing track end with the same sample at the beginning, but this time far more isolated with the woodwinds, as we hear one last segment of that slap bass, followed by an ending with the same synthesized violin stroke heard at the beginning of the song. I've noticed this stylistic choice with Naganuma. He typically likes to end off songs the way he started them, and it makes for a more satisfying listening experience in my opinion.
I don't understand what's going on here.
Up next, we have the song That's Enough, a song that has a much chiller vibe than most of the other ones in this game, but one that still has Hideki Naganuma's signature goodness. This song starts off with the heavy electronic rhythm of percussions, transitioning into the even heavier slap bass rhythm that you just can't help but bob your head to. I feel like the funk in this piece is the strongest in the game, aside from another song, Everybody Jump Around, that wasn't actually composed by Hideki Naganuma. Back onto this song, I just gotta say, Hideki's DJ persona sure rings out loud in this piece in particular. The overall vibe of That's Enough elicits the feeling of hanging out at a party or traveling down the streets of some cool neighborhood with graffiti decorated everywhere. Especially with the sections like this. This part eventually moves until the next section, where another nice use of a sample is made to mark that smooth change in tone.
The music just turns me on.
That sample, by the way, is from Venus 1999 by the same name, but the song doesn't change into its main melody just yet. The next sample is used to sort of build up tension as the listener is now anticipating that transitionary period to come through again. Once we get to that period again, that buildup is much more palpable as the use of another sample from the Peach Boys' Don't Make Me Wait. The transitionary period is surprisingly not met with much fanfare, as it feels just like a normal cruising vibe as you're traveling down the streets of Shibuya. This track, in my opinion, showcases the surprising range that Hideki Naganuma has for musical composition. The way he can make tracks sound either dramatic or calm, dangerous or serene, all while keeping that same fundamental funky feeling to it, is really what distinguishes him as an artist. Back in the song, as the main melody plays, it has a sense of delightful content as the synthesizers smoothly play in the background with the samples to create this cooling effect, even with the striking percussion we heard earlier. For all it's worth, this isn't the most technically complex song in the OST, but it is nonetheless memorable because of the overall vibe it sends to the player as they skate around in the game. Sometimes less is more, and the more low-key feel of this track makes it that much more memorable. The song just does its thing, and it doesn't overstay its welcoming. The only other sample featured in it is this groaning-like sound that was notably pitched down. It's probably from Touch and Go by Ecstasy, Passion and Pain. Just thought I'd mention that before we move on. The song ends with a nice sequence of fast cut samples to funky percussion. On to the final boss theme of Jet Set Radio, Grace and Glory. This song immediately sets the tone for the big event with this ominous sample of a lady screaming and a resonant note. In tandem is a chord of equally eerie sounding chorusmen. This carries over into the second verse, where the lady drops and tones from earlier in the song really build for what's about to happen. The next section of the song really sets the stage for the amount of funkiness about to take place in this level, as the percussion begins to come in alongside a more creepy voice, and it creates this cacophony of horror about to take place. If I didn't know any better, this song would make me feel like a jump scare is coming up, but right when this section reaches its climax, the song brilliantly transitions to a strong electronic bass section that actually juxtaposes the previous section, removing all voices entirely and just keeping that funky groove. Almost as if the song itself is saying, hey now, this is still Jet Set Radio you're playing, it's just that if you're gonna have a creepy feeling song, you're going to do it on our terms. That section then has some quite humorous sound effects of people screaming in order to transition fully into the main melody of this piece. This part of the song is just so orchestral. It feels grand and climactic, as it reasonably should be as a final level. That slap bass in the background, along with the now screaming ethereal choir, as if a heavenly event is taking place, really makes for a type of sound that I've never quite heard before in a song. I guess that just really speaks to the uniqueness of Naganuma's compositional skills, able to use and reuse genres to great stylistic effect, and bend them to his will. After that huge and memorable section, the song kind of loops back to the beginning of the piece. Though it is a little bit on the shorter side, Grace and Glory is simply a classic track in the original JSR OST, and it's one of Hideki Naganuma's favorites as it receives a future remix alongside the likes of Let Mom Sleep and Sneakman. Definitely a banger. The final track of Jet Set Radio's OST that I want to analyze is Sweet Soul Brother, because 1, it was intended to be the end credits theme for the game, and 2, it's by far one of the most unique tracks in the game, and I'm sure that's saying something. Because it was intended for the credits of Jet Set Radio, Sweet Soul Brother takes the player through a ride of emotions with its jovial tone and climactic nature. Even though there is a melody mix of all the tracks in the game as the end credits theme, I kind of like this song better to fulfill that role. The song encapsulates the game's unique blend of music, style, and energy. It has a real essence to it that makes it stand out among the rest. All the while, it isn't devoid of Naganuma's iconic style. The constant use of the Sweet Soul Brothers sample from Soul Man's Sweet Charles,
He's a sweet soul brother,
certainly ties the game's vibes together, especially after the intense and stress-inducing track of Grace and Glory. Just like the songs themselves, Hideki Naganuma is keenly aware of how the sequence or placement of songs in the soundtrack will affect the player. Things such as playing the slick and smooth menu theme after the bombastic opener of Let Mom Sleep, or the calming sounds of Tokyo Toe in That's Enough after the fast adrenaline-pumping Sneakman to jam out to. And of course, the joyful radiant highs of Sweet Soul Brother come as a great relief after the eerie and dark Grace and Glory to finish up the game and wrap everything together. Mastering that ebb and flow, not through just the musical tracks themselves, but also within the entire OST as a whole, is the true mark of an amazing artist. Okay, so I lied a bit. There's actually one more song that I wish to talk about in Jet Set Radio's OST. This is a song that I feel is quite overlooked in the discussion surrounding Jet Set Radio's legacy. The song I am talking about, of course, is the elusive Funky Radio.
Hey out there, this is Tokyo's very own #1 pirate power station, Jet Set Radio!
This song just oozes the exact style and vibe of JSR as a franchise. It starts off with that same bombastic and unapologetic funky rhythm that the opening song has, but it quickly transitions into a far more calm and inviting beat, emphasizing the laid-back nature that this style and genre is capable of, and that the song by extension will adopt.
Ooh, check it out. Now that you're feeling real tipsy, let me take you on a trip and roll with me. Where the brothers get their party on every day, because we got to do that anyway. Hey, it's time to get on down to the funky rhythm.
Just like the song says, the beats are making you feel really tipsy and making you put your guard down, or rather, making you feel less tense, like everything's going to be alright. The mood of the track is built from within, regardless of the context in which you hear it from, which is just outstanding music composition. And not only that, most well-composed tracks in an OST can elevate the gameplay experience as well. In Jet Set Radio, the music complements the game's actions and themes, making skating around and tagging in the city feel even more exhilarating. In my opinion, Funk Radio perfectly captures that vibe and era of funk and hip-hop culture. The DJ rapper in the background who goes under the alias BB Wrights is also charismatic and really brings the track to life. The slow repeating melodic sequence creates this timeless feeling in the player that takes them back to an era where experiences like Jet Set Radio were common for many people. The synthetic voices in the background are used to build that feeling alongside the groovy bass. And the break at the midsection, where the voices just ring out in this melancholic tone alongside the breakdown of the main melody, Funky Radio just feels so nostalgic and resonates with me no matter when or where I'm listening to it. This song right here is easily my favorite in the entire game, and I think it represents the game most authentically. Its energy, style, and distinctiveness makes it a memorable piece in a soundtrack that still remains beloved by many fans years after the game's release.
On the street, there's no such thing as the end. Get ready for a revolution of sound and a revival of soul. You good little boys and girls out there better turn down that dial, cause this is just another day here in Tokyo, our concrete jungle. Just a little more color on the blood-soaked coliseum we call home.
As I said earlier in this video, Jet Set Radio didn't end up selling that well. Its Western-inspired OST and graffiti-inspired art style did not appeal to the Japanese gaming audience at that time. But for the creators of the game, the niche and dedicated fanbase that it did end up garnering was enough for them. The cel-shaded art style was something truly remarkable at the time, as it was the first game to actually feature that type of art style, and it was hailed as a masterpiece by most who played it at that time. It was innovative not just in terms of its music and gameplay, but also paved the way for future games to experiment with its distinct visual style. At the end of the day, above all else, Jet Set Radio is a game that just wants you to have fun. The music, art, and gameplay are all meant to elicit feelings of joy and adventure within the player, and hopefully along the way, they will receive the awesome and anti-establishment messaging that the game tries to portray through its style and themes. As for Hideki Naganuma, this game set him on the map to becoming a video game composing legend. His name at this point was well known throughout the industry, and definitely overseas due to his contributions to JSR. As mentioned before, his name became so synonymous with the Jet Set Radio brand that he quickly gained a cult following of mostly non-Japanese fans that make up his social media fanbase. Sega surely wasn't dropping him anytime soon. He was at the top of his game, and yet, Naganuma still had so much to show the world, and would continue to refine his skills in music composition even further. And lucky for him, one day, those skills would be needed once again, as Sega dropped out of the console market and committed itself to being a third-party developer. They decided to focus more on their brand titles and franchises, as that can feature a far more reliable market for them. One day, in 2001, at the Tokyo Game Show, a video game trade fair and convention, Sega showed off a pretty familiar game title that would once again shake up the gaming world to its very core. And for it, Hideki Naganuma truly created a magnum opus that would ingrain his name into the video game music world for the rest of history. That game in question was the highly anticipated sequel, Jet Set Radio Future. Jet Set Radio Future is a game that improves upon its original Foundation's concepts in every conceivable way. It wasn't even viewed as a sequel by the game's creators, rather a reimagining of the original game's themes, gameplay, and aesthetics. Everything in Jet Set Radio Future is turned up to 11. The cel-shaded graphics are even more stylish this time around, with much more inspiration from Western street game culture. The gameplay was fully revamped with much more fast-paced action and a longer campaign. The map used to explore Tokyo-to nearly doubled in size as compared to the original. And of course, the most important evolution was the absolutely masterful OST that featured many different song composers and bands from around the world, with the most iconic one being Hideki Naganuma at its helm. The game's OST takes a widely different tone than the original games, opting for a more futuristic and funkadelic approach to creating its tracks. After all, Jet Set Radio was supposed to act as a statement about the future of the world and how human artistic expression would evolve over time. There is noticeably more focus on the themes of corporate greed and the unyielding threat of unchecked power in the form of the Rokaku police. The game makes a huge deal of how future technology, if in the wrong hands, will be used to suppress the artistic expression of humanity. But that same exact technology can also be used to further bolster it. The new slick character designs for all 23 playable characters are highly improved in quality and presentation. It really speaks to the overall theme greatly, so you know that if the music in the game wanted to compare with that amount of passion, Hideki Naganuma would have to dive deep inside of himself and find that true essence of rebellion that so defined the type of game they were trying to make. And in my opinion, he totally outdid himself and created what is still today considered the most unforgettable soundtrack of all time. Some of Naganuma's most iconic songs have been featured in Jet Set Radio Future's OST, and among them, the most popular by far is the completely stellar Concept of Love. If this game's OST was the soundtrack of the year, then this one track was definitely the song of the year for how much it simply slaps. I feel around this point in time, Hideki Naganuma had perfected his style of sampling and using voice clips of seemingly random words or phrases and morphing them to fit inside of any rhythm or beat he wanted. It's truly incredible how this man can find musical potential in the most mundane of places. It's a good testament to the amount of talent he has as an artist. And the Concept of Love is a true testament to how far he has come as a musician, with his flawless use of futuristic percussion riffs to create the groovy feeling of this song, the brilliant melodic timing throughout every section of the track, and the absolutely beautiful use of one of the most important speeches for civil rights in American history. This, of course, is The Free Huey by Stokely Carmichael, a Black Panther political activist.
We do not understand the concept of love.
The use of this sample from this famous speech in what's supposed to serve as Jet Set Radio Future's main song really showcases how well Naganuma understood the game's themes and the source material. For a Japanese game of all things, most Western video game soundtracks at the time wouldn't even dare to have this level of political messaging in their music. But nonetheless, here we are. Sega must have really wanted to set themselves apart from the harsh competition, not just in its branding, but even in the messaging of their products as well. And JSRF is better off for it, honestly. I find it crazy how this one song features a good mix of all the styles JSRF's soundtrack would take the player through. The early introduction of such a masterful song must have surely been a treat for returning players of Jet Set Radio. This one song proved to any returning or new players that this game would be more ambitious, unapologetic, and ridiculously funkier than any experience that came before it. And honestly, with the song this good to start off the game, I'd assume that it doesn't get better from here, but boy would you be ever wrong in thinking that. Most of the other songs in the game can be just as impactful, rival, or even surpass the concept of love in my opinion. Some of these other tracks include Fly Like a Butterfly, Funky Dealer, Techno Pathetic, Shape the Future, and a remix in the game that's so good it far surpasses the originals.
Fly like a butterfly. Fly like a butterfly.
Fly Like a Butterfly starts off with a slow melodic electric riff, underscoring the psychedelic sample of a person saying fly like a butterfly. After the first verse, it quickly transitions the beat to a more slap-based groovy style to immediately give off what I can only describe as a Tony Hawk Pro Skater vibe of music.
Like a fly, like a butterfly.
The main melody then fully breaks out into that style, with the slap bass becoming even more pronounced and center-focused. One thing that first-time listeners might notice about this game's OST is that there is a lot more heavy use of techno elements throughout each track in the game. From this song's driving beats and synthesized sounds, it anchors itself firmly within the realm of electronic music. This provides the energetic pace and rhythmic characteristic to many songs in Jet Set Radio Future's OST. The song then goes into a huge breakdown where the sample is repeated rapidly at a syncopated pace before finally getting into that sweet butt rock section. You can just hear that electric guitar go absolutely buck wild with its riffs. Definitely my favorite part in the song by far. The next section features a more stabilized main melody for a couple of verses, just to properly build up to the next hard break. During that break, we get this iconic line and phrase.
I felt like a bulldozer.
Wild and wild.
Trying to catch a butterfly.
Wild and wonderful. Monster.
I swear, sometimes it just feels like Hideki puts whatever he wants into these songs, and they still come out as complete bangers. I just don't know how he does it. Fly Like a Butterfly does become kind of repetitive, but I feel like that's sort of expected with it being one of the first missions in the game. Nevertheless, it still keeps that funky and rebellious feeling throughout the entire track, with the part towards the end of the song straying more towards that psychedelic futuristic vibe, nicely foreshadowing what's to come in the game's soundtrack.
Felt like a butterfly.
And a winner. Pay the front line, take the don'ts. He's coming out again for a new point. Get your bets down, ladies and gentlemen. 4 fours to point, mark 4. Ace, deuce, scraps, wants 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 4. Ace, deuce, ace, deuce, scrap, want 4. Scrap, want 4. Who wants the hard 4? 5 wants 4.
Check me out, y'all.
Next up is Funky Dealer, probably one of the most iconic tracks in the game, and another track that you hear pretty early on. A genuine masterclass in how to integrate samples and musical motifs in a satisfying and cohesive manner. This song takes a more swing approach to creating its funky beat, and the samples are much more pronounced as a result. Seriously, it is uncanny how rhythmic the casino dealer's calling out of the dice roll is.
9 a winner. Pay the front line, take the don'ts. He's coming out again for a new point. 4 fours to point, mark 4. Who wants the hard 4? 5 wants 4. Ace, deuce, scraps wants 4.
That sample sounds like it was made to be used in a musical composition. It's a surprise I didn't hear it in any other songs prior to this one. This song also takes a far more hard rock and jazzy style of music, I guess to better fit the casino vibe of the level in Rokaku Dai Heights. This, alongside the use of that sample, not only enhances the thematic elements of the track, but also adds a rhythmic component that feels organic to the song. I will say, because of this, the percussion and acoustic elements of this piece feel far different than most other tracks in the game, but to be honest, every single track in JSRF feels distinct and unique in their own way. Back onto the piece, once Funky Dealer gets into its main melodic section, the nice grooviness is truly felt in the player. The whole vibe of this song just feels so bombastic and fun. It feels like the song is taking you along for a ride. The samples used in this song are particularly heavy, with me being able to find almost all of them, and they're all used to great effect, especially when we get into that beautiful bridge section of the song.
Play 6.
So funky. So funky.
Coming out again for a new point.
So funky.
Bets down, ladies and gentlemen.
That transition, man, it just fills you with satisfaction and ecstasy. The way it slowly shifts to more syncopated notes and adopts a newfound jovial type of feel. It's really hard to explain, but it feels like the song is alive and actively endearing itself to the player, and it keeps that same techno bass throughout the rest of the entire song. Almost like the song has truly adopted this new type of feel, and has kept it to further the song's bombastic nature. As I've stated before, Hideki's music has a strong narrativization aspect throughout them, with all of them being able to take the listener on a ride throughout every single piece in the game. This ability to utilize non-traditional and musical samples and turn them into an integral part of a musical composition is a testament to Naganuma's creative genius. It also showcases his skill in blending the unexpected into cohesive and catchy tunes, and as you're probably guessing at this point, it enhances Jet Set Radio Future's themes greatly.
6 to point. Play 6.
Stop. Playing games. When I'm running. Stranger names. Stop.
For this next song, Techno Pathetic, I think I can say with confidence that this is up there with Concept of Love for one of Naganuma's most known tracks.
Playing games. Running stranger names. Stop playing games. Running stranger names.
If the other tracks in the OST didn't scream the new techno-inspired music that Naganuma was being influenced by, then I think this song should solidify that motif into the ears of all the players who finally listen to it. Techno Pathetic is just one of those songs that sticks inside of your head many times after the point at which you initially heard it. It's such an earworm of a song to get obsessed with, like most tracks in the game. It starts off with the hyper-synthesized voice that I believe was sampled from a song called Robo Trap by SoundScan.
Stop playing games, thinking I'm bound to exchange your name. Standing there looking shy when you know I'm the reason why you got that growing.
The track then quickly begins to build tension as a high sample of the singer's voice, which I cannot for the life of me find the origin of, starts playing to the offbeat of the established techno bass. This song really sounds sci-fi, with the distorted electronic instruments detailing out the futuristic soundscape this game was going for, brilliantly mixing the funkadelic elements of the previous soundtrack and integrating them nicely with the symphonic atmosphere of this reimagined Tokyo-to. We finally get into the main melody of the song, and honestly, it's kind of styled like an ethereal sounding track in my opinion, with its subtle bass and elegant organs playing in the background. The organ-like synthesizers play in a staccato-like manner, adding to the track's rhythmic complexity and timing. It's not a common sound found in the rest of JSRF's soundtrack, which is what makes this track stand out amongst the rest. The break towards the middle of the song especially feels less in your face than other songs, and has a far more laid-back tone and chill vibe. It kinda sounds like you're just chilling with some friends on the couch. I guess it was meant to accentuate the more beginner-friendly level of Dogenzaka Hill, the location where this track can be heard in the game. The signature intense style of Naganuma does return, however, towards the end of Techno Pathetic, with the synthesized sample voices becoming even more crazed and chaotic, and the crescendo towards the climax of the song. And then it just ends on a... Now this next one is personally one of my favorite songs in the entire soundtrack, and that is Shape the Future. By far the most electronica-based track in the game, more so than Techno Pathetic, Shape the Future fully embraces the soundtrack's gradual build-up into more modern, electric-sounding pop music. The atmosphere throughout the entire piece invokes a tone of futurism and elegance.
No, you're gonna dig this.
And the otherworldly vibes this song gives off doesn't even end there. As it builds towards the main part of the song, the use of this processed voice sample, which again I cannot find, alongside the telepathic sounding synthesizer chords, makes this song give off the feeling of a dreamy, ethereal experience. And when it finally reaches that first drop, it just absolutely owns it. It goes right back into that signature grungy and rebellious atmosphere with its hard electric guitar riffs and hard bass undertones. Even in a more electronica-driven track, these rock elements act as anchors to the song's overarching themes. I just gotta say, this song has the best beat drop in my opinion. The sound quality and symphonic nature of this section truly makes it an unforgettable track in the game, and it's only getting started. As the song goes into a short bridge, we hear more processed samples enter the mix. Those electric instruments eventually come back in and cool off the intensity of the song just by a little bit to get ready for the next big section. That being the massive breakdown of the entire piece. We're left with the same sample oscillating in the background, as the song allows the electric bass and synthesizers to ring out their melodies without any accompanying percussion to hinder it. It really creates this nice contrast to the previous sections full of overbearing instrumentation and a huge futuristic soundscape, making this section in particular the most memorable part of the song.
Here we go now. On the offense. Here we go now. On the offense. Here we go now. Now on the offense. Here we go now. Now on the offense. Here we go.
Unlike many of Naganuma's tracks in this game that have pronounced melodic lines, Shape the Future focused more on atmosphere and rhythm. The melody is much more subdued this time, and the track instead thrives on its techno soundscape. Because of that, this song is able to have the best of both worlds, with it still having that rough-edged auditory punch with its rock, while still allowing for a more futuristic and electronica style of music to resonate with the game's soul. It's a testament to Naganuma's ability to experiment with various musical elements while still keeping the same identity and vibe of the game. It's consistent and palpable. For the final song I want to analyze in Jet Set Radio Future, I want to also contextualize it a little bit. A good amount of the original game's OST is in JSFR's soundtrack in the form of remixes. Hideki Naganuma probably chose these songs to be remixed because they were some of the most iconic ones from that game's soundtrack that I've already mentioned. Stinkman, That's Enough, Sweet Soul Brother, Grace and Glory, and Rocket On were all some of the tracks mentioned in this OST that have been remixed in Jet Set Radio Future. And they all do an excellent job of showcasing the growth and evolution of Naganuma's musical style over the course of the two games. One remix in particular, however, surpasses them all and is a true mastercraft emblematic of everything this game franchise represents and stands for. The remix I am talking about is the infamous No Sleep version of Let Mom Sleep. I just love the way this song screams out its rebellious nature and anti-establishment edge. It does such a great job of immediately setting the tone for what the series Jet Set Radio is all about. The youthful defiance against authority and societal norms, only for those sirens to immediately dissipate into cut-up syncopated notes. And that repeating verse eventually leads into the far more refined and techno beat melody this time around. You can honestly tell how much of an improvement Naganuma's style has become with regard to how he utilizes percussion in his music. The original track already slaps so hard, so it's crazy to notice how much Naganuma has improved in general in between the game's releases. Not only that, but the classic samples he uses this time around create a more fast-paced vibe and atmosphere for the entire piece. The way that same Tony Hancock play sample is used, but this time in a new, distorted, and processed-sounding way.
Yes. Would you stop playing with that radio of yours? I'm trying to get to sleep.
The slide samples are far more frenetic and pronounced this time around, and the absolutely killer stutter edits, or cuts, that are used throughout this piece to sell the more grungy and dangerous feeling atmosphere of the entire game. This technique, often used to create a rhythmic repetition or glitchy effect in music, has been a staple of Naganuma's style, but in this remix in particular, I believe he truly started to master it. This song right here solidified his willingness to get even crazier with the nonsensical use of sounds and samples in his music, with the record scratching and screaming vocals this time around being much like how Sneakman does it. But this song also has a sense of maturity, with its smoother transitions between the bridge and breakdowns of each respective section of the song. In this regard, I think that it completely knocks the original version of Let Mom Sleep completely out of the park, from its sampling to its general composition and instrumentation. This remix brings waves of nostalgia for fans of the first game, while offering an evolved, fresher take of the song, preserving the essence of the original, and creating a bridge between the old and the new. Sadly, like its predecessor, Jet Set Radio Future didn't sell all that well in Japan. Because of this financial failure, and the recent departure of the Dreamcast and thus Sega from the console market, Jet Set Radio became a sort of dead gaming franchise, along with the many other Sega IPs during this era, never again seeing the light of day in a mainline title again, only cameos and references. Rumors of a potential Jet Set Radio 3 on the Nintendo Wii made a little bit of a headline during the late 2000s, but sadly, nothing really came of it. This beautiful game and franchise, and its absolutely legendary soundtracks, will remain in the sands of time as a true classic in the gaming industry. Hideki Naganuma, on the other hand, couldn't have been in a better spot as a music composer. He just created some of the most memorable soundtracks to some of the most ambitious games of the modern era, and his name has now been firmly cemented into the industry as a sound director who is bold in his genre of music, unapologetic with his musical influence, and completely unique in his style of composition and sampling. Whether or not Naganuma realized it, he had now become a pretty legitimate Japanese song idol in his own unique way, but he still craved more. Hideki genuinely loved the work he did for Jet Set Radio 1 and Future, crafting such soundtracks that echo each other in style and tone, while also being aesthetically distinct in their own right. Must have been immensely satisfying for someone like him, who's been doing this basically since childhood. Most people aren't able to reach that level of success, much less see their goals obtained through hard work and a lot of patience. But for him, he only saw that as the next step for him to improve even further and create even more amazing music as his passion. During his entire life period as a video game composer, he always wanted to make his own original album that he could stamp his name to. Even till this day, Naganuma has expressed his want to make a sort of original soundtrack for himself, and while he hasn't come out with his original album yet, there is one thing that he has done that comes really close, and that was composing the entire soundtrack for the high-speed action skateboarding game known as Ollie King. Ollie King is one of those video games that you look at and you can kind of just instantly tell, yeah, this game probably didn't sell that well. And that's quite a shame, because if any of y'all had the pleasure of listening to its soundtrack, you know that it's one of the most underrated ones out there. Naganuma had complete creative freedom to just go buck wild and make something truly daring, mystifying, and 100% funky. This OST legitimately has it all, from its edgy and boundary-pushing lyrical tracks, to the amazing sampling and remixing of past Naganuma hits. He was absolutely in his element with this soundtrack, and it gave birth to some of his best work ever in my opinion. Ollie King was a video game that you had to play via a board attachment to an arcade machine, and you would mimic the movements of a skateboard as you would any early motion control game at that time. It's a shame then that only a handful of people got to experience this amazing OST to the exhilarating gameplay that this underrated classic had to offer. It feels as though Hideki Naganuma became even more experimental during his development of this soundtrack. You can hear the use of his samples and musical motifs evolve into a more modern pop type of feel, while still keeping the 70s and 80s style of music within him. As a result, the music in Ollie King feels akin to going through a retro roller coaster, where no two tracks in the game are ever the same type of tone or genre. You have electric pop, jazz, industrial and metal rock.
You wanna rock, yo, non-stop, yo. You wanna rock, yo, then here we go, yo. You wanna rock, yo, non-stop, yo. You wanna rock, yo, give you what I got, yo. You wanna rock, yo, non-stop, yo. You wanna rock, yo, then here we go, yo. You wanna rock, yo, non-stop, then here we go, yo. I'll give you what I got, yo. Let it go.
Disco, hip-hop, bossa nova, and the ever so iconic funk. And all of this is over the course of just 8 individual songs. Each and every single piece is memorable and masterfully crafted to just be enjoyed in a game that was largely ignored by the general gaming industry. It's a good testament to the dedication Hideki has to his work and passion. Some of the true highlights of this soundtrack in my opinion are Let It Go, Something Jazzy for Your Mind, Body and Soul, and Brother Goes Away. Naganuma was just in his bag when making these 3 tracks. And Something Jazzy for Your Mind, Body and Soul in particular, utilizing the opening song Bordy 70's sample pretty well. It creates a satisfying callback if you're listening to the OST in one go, with every song back to back, creating a more cohesive experience in the process. Let It Go was the first track of Hideki Naganuma's that I personally put as one of my favorite songs of all time, with its clean use of the iconic 9 lyrical paragraph sample from Rhapsody's Climax 9.
Well, it's the lyrical paragraphs, your tracks make me laugh. You're front on a microphone, you didn't pass math. And science, the main ingredient to be the finest of the fittest. You did it and yo, I ain't with it. You failed though the lessons wanna remain the top 10. Stop, look and listen, give props to the light skin. Knowledge is the key to be the best of a black man. Wisdom understands the
Well, it's the lyrical paragraphs, your tracks make me laugh. You're front on a microphone, you didn't pass math. And science, the main ingredient to be the finest of the fittest. You did it and yo, I ain't with it. You failed though the lessons wanna remain the top 10. Stop, look and listen, give props to the light skin. Knowledge is the key to be the best of a black man.
Other notable aspects of the soundtrack that it features is the 2 remixes from Jet Set Radio Future songs, them being remixes of Techno Pathetic and Concept of Love. Techno Pathetic takes on a disco vibe with its remix, featuring more frenetic violins and subdued electric instrumentation. I gotta say, I actually think I like this remix more than the original. The original is great and all, don't get me wrong, but this song feels more refined and elegant. The use of the iconic samples this time around makes the song much more experimental and fun, as Hideki fully utilizes them more often to greater effect than in the original one. There's also this banger violin bass solo in the middle of the song that's just beautiful. And if that wasn't enough, there's an incredible breakdown towards the end of the song that makes the piece have a more professional, higher quality sound to it. Almost as if the song is telling a story to the listener, and as a result, the song feels more complete and whole to listen to. Onto the concept of love, this remix has a more electro dance pop style to it, with a hint of 70s funkadelic thrown into the mix. It actually deviates from the original style heavily, with even the hard rock segments being toned down considerably from how they were before. Because of this, I don't really think it surpassed the first song's boldness and boisterous flair, but this remix does do a good job of reimagining this iconic tune in a new light. It decides to tell a different story with its composition and style, and that differing message and story is probably about how we now truly do understand the concept of love. And with that, I highly recommend you go listen to Ollie King's soundtrack on your own, as I do not wish to spoil the masterful music more than I already have. Trust me, you will not regret listening to it after everything I've said here. It truly is Naganuma's hidden gem in every sense of the word. With all this being said, Hideki Naganuma has had a pretty good track record with Sega at this point. He worked on two of their most massive games at the turn of the century, did some work on many other game projects like Super Monkey Ball and the aforementioned Ollie King. It was looking about time for Hideki to leave the studio altogether and move on to greener pastures, beyond just the scope of gaming music. But little did he know, Sega couldn't just get rid of him just yet. They needed his talents once more for one big final OST in their games. This time, it would be for their big, bright, and coolest mascot that had become the face of Sega and all of the company's branding. A soundtrack that most people watching this video are probably the most familiar with than all the others I've discussed this far. This game I am talking about is, of course, Sonic Rush for the Nintendo DS.
Stop, proceed, cause this is what you need. Stop, proceed, cause this is what you need. Stop, proceed, cause this is what you need. Proceed, cause this is what you need.
Being the final big game at Sega that Hideki Naganuma would be the primary composer for, the creative freedom, along with the intrinsic style that comes with Sonic the Hedgehog, allowed him to create something truly spectacular. Even with the constraints imposed by the Nintendo DS's sound chip, Naganuma still found a way to make his style clearly heard throughout each of the game's levels and bosses. And this bombastic style that he brought to the Blue Blurs franchise can be witnessed no better than in Sonic Rush's titular title theme, What You Need. Naganuma masterfully mimics the high-quality instrumentation he would normally use for his compositions, and not only implements them in a way that matches the DS format to a T, but also fits perfectly with the aesthetics and tone that Sonic Rush was going for. It feels like a match made in heaven between Hideki Naganuma and Sonic the Hedgehog. Both are figures that defy the confines and conventions of their role in society. Sonic, for being a platforming mascot meant to rival the success and mainstream appeal of Mario, while oozing 90s style edgy marketing and corporate politics. And Hideki Naganuma, a music composer that draws inspiration mainly from outside of his country, creating boundary-pushing, almost taboo video game music, of genres and styles of cultures that were almost unheard of in the gaming industry at the time. This was the dynamic duo of the era, genuine contemporaries in their craft. It's almost surprising how long it actually took for Sega to get Naganuma to work on a Sonic game, and the fact that it's only one to speak of. And boy does he make the most with this opportunity. Sonic Rush's soundtrack is still to this day one of the most memorable ones in the franchise, despite the crazy amount of competition that it has to deal with. With this franchise's stream of constant bangers, that's a hard title to match up to. But I think the main reason why it works so well is because each song in every level of the game is just so damn unique and catchy. Unlike his previous OSTs, Hideki actually took the approach of gearing each song to the overall vibe and aesthetic of each level, rather than crafting a general stylistic tone for the entire thing. Because of this, the OST for Sonic Rush feels much more chaotic and random when you're just listening to it on your own, removed from the context of the game, But if you're actually in-game, as you're blazing through forests, grinding on skylines, and blowing up giant bases, it feels absolutely exhilarating and heart-pounding. The absolute adrenaline you get with every piece in the soundtrack just screams edge and excitement. You just can't help but bob your head to every track in this game, from the triumphant horns of Ethno Circus, to the electro, jazz, and funk of JJ Rocket. The hard percussion and rock of Wrapped in Black.
Too strong, too strong, too late, too strong, too late, too strong, too late, too strong, too strong, too strong.
And the edgy sharpness of the guitar riffs and metal scratching. All of these songs are filled to the brim with iconic sounds, and most definitely samples that will stay stuck inside of your head many times over after already hearing the songs for the first time. I can't even recall the amount of times I've listened to this OST all the way through, and yet, every single time I'm constantly stunned by the amount of creativity and artistry Hideki Naganuma displays with every measure of music. It's simply unreal how good he is at his craft, and I haven't even talked about the most iconic songs from this soundtrack, that are personally some of my favorite Sonic songs in the series. Those tracks of course being Back to Back, Vela Nova, and the absolutely stellar Bomber Barbera. Each one of these masterpieces are songs I anticipate listening to on every playthrough of Sonic Rush, and somehow they keep getting better every time I listen to them. Starting off with Back to Back, the song immediately makes itself stand out from the rest, with nothing but a hard snare beat in the background, bouncing along to the absolutely iconic sample of the voice saying Back to Back. Some sources say that this was sampled from a song called The Haunted House of Rock by Houdini, but I feel like that's a bit of a stretch to say with this one. I don't know. It just seems too off to me. That little section goes on for a couple of verses with more instrumentation slowly inching their way into the main intro for this song. It eventually cuts into this bridge with the now subdued instruments building up in the background, almost creating this underwater feeling to them. I cannot overstate just how incredible it is that Naganuma was able to mimic the vibe of a beach or a coastal aesthetic with the limited sound chip of the DS. It sounds so damn good, and it's made on less powerful hardware. Yes, limitations really do breed creativity. That part then goes into the main melody of the piece, which just sounds bright and jovial, almost like a celebration of some sort is taking place. During this part, we get some more of that iconic sound cutting from Hideki. It really just feels good to listen to. And it gets even better as it makes its way to the bridge of the song, where you get this synthesizer solo to ring out alongside that percussion, creating this fun, water park-like aesthetic, which I guess is the whole point. That then transitions to the section where the sample is mixed up a bit more to play off the offbeats of the song in a more syncopated fashion than what was heard previously. It creates this nice cooling effect for the piece. This too is then used to go into a more subdued solo that builds back up to that anticipated melody again, coming around full circle with that big band sound that is brighter than ever in the song's final moments before the loop. That final loop, once again being composed in a way that makes it feel like you're being submerged underwater. And then the song just resets to do it all over again in a satisfying manner. Just overall, awesome craftsmanship as expected at this point from Naganuma. You could probably see and hear why this song and stage have become so classic to the Sonic franchise. Vela Nova starts off with this harsh animalistic safari type beat. It just sounds so gritty and feral, almost like you're going through a dangerous trek through some godforsaken jungle, which, depending on who you're up against in this battle, is perfectly fitting. The end to this verse introduces something that makes this track so good and memorable in the first place. The use of strong orchestral instrumentation to mimic the feeling of an ethereal battle taking place. It starts off with the slow introduction of the blaring horns, but eventually, the song adds in a sexy saxophone and that iconic slap bass to the mix. Going into the second verse of this song, it turns up the heat drastically, with that initial melody evolving into a more fast-paced, tango-like beat. It really gives off the vibe that this isn't just a mere fight between two rivals, but perhaps something deeper, maybe even a quarrel between two lovers. This song's dynamic complexity is once again achieved with the limitations of the DS sound chip, just to remind you all. The romantic tension becomes even greater with the second melody of the song, where it adopts a more groovy, disco-like vibe, stronger than the one it already had earlier. Disco as a genre has its roots in funk, soul, and pop, and it often exudes a sense of energy, celebration, and even sensuality, which is probably the reason Naganuma likes to dabble with the style so much in his music, especially later in his career. When applied to Villanova, this influence adds layers of depth to the song and thus the boss battle that it takes place in. I haven't even mentioned the samples in this piece yet. This time around, the samples of people speaking are more soft-spoken and add a tender vibe to the piece, which aids in that orchestral, ethereal feeling all the more. Aside from the main sample, which acts as the tempo holder, the rest of them are by far the most subtle they have ever been in one of Hideki's songs, and that makes this piece stand out to me a lot. He definitely nailed the serious tone he was going for with Villanova, while still staying true to his iconic style. There's even a full saxophone solo towards the end of this piece, which is accompanied by a nice breakdown of the melody to accentuate the overall aesthetic of this aggressive, passionate, messy conflict. I'm probably making this song sound a little too spicy, if you know what I mean. You know what? Let me just move on to the next piece before some of y'all get a little too excited with this analysis.
Let's do it.
Bomber Barbera is a song that no human can ever forget if they play Sonic Rush. It still to this day has the best intro to any of Naganuma's songs that I've listened to. And that's saying something, since all of his songs have intense, bombastic openers, but this song takes it to the extreme. Serving as the main theme for the penultimate boss of the game, Barbera's dynamic intro immediately grabs the player's attention with its energetic and unique start, setting the stage for the rest of the track. I love the brilliant use of the space shuttle sample being used to sound like a siren or an alarm, alerting the listener to the fact that there's tension in the air and that they should exercise extreme caution. And then those guitar riffs just pop into the mix to guide us into the main melody. Man, it's just a burst of organic, raw energy amidst the more synthesized elements, making this song feel more alive and vibrant. Those striking synth notes only continue to add to that frenetic tone that was built up in the piece from the beginning. After that, we finally get to the iconic sample that roars in the background as the intensity of the song is turned up to 11. I cannot imagine how adrenaline pumping this track must have sounded as a kid when listening to and playing this boss for the first time. And of course, it only gets better from here. The main melody track, like many of Naganuma's other works, blends various genres including rock, electric pop, and funk into the mix. This fusion makes the song feel fresh and different from traditional Sonic final boss music that we're accustomed to. That break in the middle of the piece also provides a great resting point for anybody trying to catch their breath during this intense scruffle, and it makes preparing for the next section that much more satisfying. Everything about this piece, from the stellar electronic instrumentation fueling the beat of the song, to the amazing use of the sample cutting and sound effects, it really just elevates this song to masterpiece level in my opinion. Definitely my favorite song in Sonic Rush's soundtrack.
Is that it?
It is also important for me to mention that Hideki also composed the tracks for Blaze the Cat in the game as well. Her themes are more tailored to being more smooth and less aggressive as Sonic's. The remixes are usually more subdued and have a old elegance element to them, almost as if they're trying to outdo the other tracks with their more refined tone and uniqueness. I think that Sonic's tracks are just slightly better than Blaze's, but in all honesty, that's just more of a personal preference. Obviously, his tracks are by far the most popular ones and the most replayed when it comes to this game, but Blaze does have quite a few standout tracks that are equally amazing or even outshine Sonic's. For example, I think the mixed up vocals and energetic trumpets added to Blaze's back-to-back remix somehow makes the track even more fun, like you're traveling through a grand metropolis amusement park. The sequencing is especially nice on this part. Blaze's JJ Rocket also invokes a more dire and serious tone. As the bass plays more in the downscale, making the melody now take on a more frenetic feeling. And that synth that underscores it all is just simply bliss. Other than those two, I've never really found her tracks as amazing or earwormish as the titular characters are, but as you probably already know at this point, Hideki incorporates so much style and character into both sides of the OST that they're equally fun to listen to, all the same. Also, Blaze's What You Need remix absolutely slaps with its more generational and evolved composition. While Sonic's version has a more fun and groovy tone to it, Blaze's adopts a more theatrical and urgent type of feel, beautifully contrasting these two amazing characters once again, thematically and musically. Hideki Naganuma's music just feels like a perfect fit for the world of Sonic, enhancing the gameplay experience and further defining the unique character of the franchise. His addition to the legendary cast of soundtracks will definitely stay up there with many of the greats that people have fallen in love with so many times over. It definitely matches the likes of Sonic Unleashed, Colors, and 06 in terms of its uniqueness and experimentation. Sonic Rush ended up becoming a successful hit with over 3 million copies sold, and it being the 6th best-selling game on the Nintendo DS in 2006. Definitely a year where Sega needed a win of some kind, I'll say that much. The soundtrack was heralded as a masterpiece, and Hideki was actually nominated the Golden Joystick Awards for Soundtrack of the Year, a prestige that I'm sure he's very proud of. Sadly, Naganuma was denied the opportunity to work on Sonic Rush's anticipated sequel, Sonic Rush Adventure, and he would soon choose to leave Sega after his legendary streak from 1998 to 2008. A clean decade of some of the most influential gaming music ever, the legendary trifecta if you will. He left in order to become a freelance artist that takes different clients from time to time, but he would still work on some more Sega games in the future, under his hilariously named alias, Skankfunk. A pretty accurate name if I do say so myself. But don't let this departure fool you. Hideki had still been active in the industry long after he left Sega, and now he was basically free to compose for whoever he wanted, on whatever he wanted. And this newfound freedom would lead of course to more iconic bangers from the man that continued to stir up the gaming industry. Let's get into that and analyze some of Naganuma's other iconic works. Hideki Naganuma is a man of many musical talents. If there's one thing that this video has taught you, it's that he does not shy away from working with different types of genres and styles. With that all being said, if you want to realize just how much of an impact he's had in the industry, let's take a look at all the games he's composed for since his departure from Sega. Starting off with his work on Kuroyo Ryuga, a spin-off of the Yakuza series. Being one of Sega's actually better known IPs, I guess they wanted Naganuma to shed a little bit of his magic on the franchise, just for old time's sake. It was just a spin-off, they said. He didn't have to go as hard on making the music for it, they said. Yeah, well, you can take a good guess about how Hideki handled that general sentiment. This song simply cooks. The use of the heavily synthesized vocals along with that harsh, grungy, orchestral rock feel really adds flair to what this fighting game is actually supposed to feel like. It's an exhilarating composition that hilariously is probably more popular than the actual game. Hideki feels so confident and cocky with this track. The way he seamlessly mixes together all of the skills from his previous works to bring a still fresh and original take on fighting game music is so satisfying. You just can't help but get down to the sound as this track transitions between acoustic rock to electronica, right back into that hard electric funk. Definitely one of his personal best tracks in my eyes. You should definitely listen to it, or all the other tracks in this video for that matter. Moving on, his next work would be on another Sega IP, Super Monkey Ball. Jeez, why did he even bother to leave if he would continue to make bangers for the company? Anyways, starting off with one of his more unusual pieces, we have Rockin' Commander from Super Monkey Ball 3D. This song sounds really unique, as it feels like a mix between Sonic Rush's style of music and Rhythm Heaven of all things, with the use of samples this time. It still keeps that strong composition with the eccentric style of Super Monkey Ball, however, with the rockin' guitars that accompany the fluent melody throughout this piece being immensely fun to listen to. The breakdown in the latter half of the song, that is preempted with the high-pitched female voices, is a great sequence that makes this series' wacky vibe more accessible and enjoyable to a nice degree. And of course, Hideki Naganuma had to end the song in the same manner at which it started. Overall, just an amazing composition. The next song, Smooth Sherbert from Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz, takes some lines from the Sonic Rush song Raising Me Up. One of the more emotional pieces of that game's OST, the samples borrowed from it in this song do a great job of selling that optimistic and utopian feel that the Monkey Ball series wishes to endear to the player. It is definitely a nostalgic feeling piece that elicits a good feeling even though I have never played those games personally. Ginger 5 is a nice party funk hop style of song that elicits a feeling of jovial ecstasy in the player. Being reminiscent of the 1920s style of speakeasies, this Yakuza 5 song sounds like it was ripped straight out of an early 1980s Disney film. If that company ever decided to touch anything even remotely edgy for a change. The bouncy and fanatic nature of the percussion, along with the vocal samples, makes it impossible to not move your body to. Even though this song is a short one, only meant to last for a 1-minute fight in the game, being that this game has a fairly serious tone to it, it's still a memorable piece specifically because of how outstanding and beautiful the composition is. It's just a standout piece, not much more to say there. This next composition is actually a pretty significant one for the man. You see, Konami has a pretty famous rhythm game series called Beatmania, a series that's been around for years. He made one particular iconic song for the series called Love Can Save You. Till this day, it is being heralded as one of the best in the series, and even acts as a sort of franchise theme and anthem. The song begins with this strong synth bass strung along to these syncopated offbeats. That section gets broken up with a nice horn drop that leads into the main melody. There's a cut of this part that's used to go back into the main melody, almost as if the song is moving through a wave of memories. The solo during this section is a nice break from the central melody that allows for the breakdown later on to juxtapose it well. Again, just masterful composition through and through. I totally see why the Beatmania fandom would make this song essentially their series theme. The next track that this man has worked on is the song Heaven Up from the game Hover, Revolt of Gamers. This game is clearly inspired by the Jet Set Radio franchise, but focuses more on the parkour and skater aspect of the series, drawing some slight inspiration from the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games. Because of that, its titular theme song features a more uplifting and spiritual sounding tone, with some bits mimicking that techno-funk seen in Sonic Rush. The main sample this time around is this beautiful voice screaming for the listeners to take them up to heaven above, almost like a calling card to the player themselves. I have to say that the sequencing for this song feels the most polished out of all of Hideki's works. The synths work beautifully in tandem with the EDM and electronic bass. They are both two perfect instruments for eliciting that feeling of a futuristic techno-utopia. The song begins to become more intense as it progresses towards the end. The samples become more pronounced, with the vocals almost sounding like it's demanding the player now. With that, however, the song draws back a little as it prepares for the grand finale, where it brings all of the instrumentation in the main melody and plays that with the chords and samples appropriately. This leads to an ending that is more subdued and low-key than most of Naganuma's songs, but nonetheless is still immensely resonant to finish off on. Definitely one of his best pieces by far. That song, however, is not nearly close to being his most popular. When talking about the iconic works of Hideki Naganuma post-Sega, I feel like it would be criminal to not talk about his work on Lethal League Blaze. A seriously underrated fighting game that not nearly enough people have played. For this game, he made the absolutely incredible track Ain't Nothing Like a Funky Beat. This legendary track plays during the matches of the game and adds to the insane, intense, and energetic atmosphere that Lethal League Blaze is known for, taking samples from Feel Good Party Time and this iconic Michael Jackson song. Hideki was able to craft not only the most memorable song in the game, but a track that perfectly encapsulates his style of music for all to witness. This song, ironically enough, is more popular and generally known by average audiences than even the likes of The Concept of Love, that banger of a track, and who can really blame people for that? As the song states itself, there's really nothing like a funky beat, and Hideki brings the strongest that he's ever had with this song, and you have yourself a pretty unforgettable earworm on your hands. I still listen to this song when I'm going on walks, in between classes, and running for exercise, or simply if I just want to listen to some great music. I turn this track on, simply to provide me with the amazing sound quality I wish to bless upon my ears, and in doing so, make my day just a little bit better. Oh, and towards the end of the song, where all the samples are brought back together for one final chorus towards the climax, it's just so good to listen to, especially when it ends in such a satisfying manner.
Ain't nothing like a funky beat.
And I could go on and on about the many masterpieces Hideki Naganuma has created over the years. His work on various anime, most notably the one called Air Gear, which is made from a manga by the same name and is also inspired by JSR.
The truth shall set you free.
His work on the Persona series, specifically Persona 3, with his remix of When the Moons Reach Out, the main theme for the dancing game. His traditional funky style and stutter cuts can be felt all over that piece.
When stars fly at noon, one hurricane's your eyes. The wildest that's my soul flows, can't help thinking of you.
And even more obscure games and tracks like Warp Drive, Dead Heat Riders, and the Gintama series of all things. It's safe to say, this man has built up quite the legacy for himself, which is why, before I feel as though I can end this extensive retrospective of Hideki Naganuma and his lasting impact on the world, I have to talk about his most recent work and how it has come full circle into what this man represents as an icon with his music. The final game he's worked on so far, inspired by the very works he has made in the past all those years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, the final work I will be analyzing for Hideki Naganuma is from the recent masterpiece, Bombrush Cyberfunk. You know, it's incredible how the art we create as humans is like a cycle. Those who get inspired by the world around them and the works of others, then go on to make their own interpretation of those works in the form of their own art and music, and thus fueling others in the future to do the same. It's a never-ending cycle of passion and the true artistic expression that is humanity. Bombrush Cyberfunk is a game that represents that cycle. There are many other video games out there like this, and just like the best ones, Bombrush goes beyond its inspirations and truly defines itself as the pinnacle spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio. This game has absolutely stunning cel-shaded visuals and a funky style that perfectly evolves on the original's themes and concepts, from its gameplay to its more gritty story, and most definitely its music. The Cyberfunk soundtrack is something truly remarkable to behold. Just like Jet Set Radio Future, you have all of these talented musicians and hip-hop artists coming together for that one singular vision. And that vision is to once again make a game that stands out from its contemporaries and truly do something fun and unconventional. But this time, they all have the same inspirations to work off of and form a more cohesive gaming experience as a whole. The team that worked on this game, Team Reptile, were the same people that worked on Lethal League Blaze, that other game that Naganuma composed the song for. So I guess it's fitting that for the next upcoming project, and potentially one of Naganuma's final impacts on the gaming industry, he would come back full circle to where it all began. The streets of a graffiti-stricken urban city. Working alongside music artists that might have literally been inspired by the very work he's done in the industry might have been really heartwarming and cool for Naganuma. So this time around, for his final mark, he would have to give something truly spectacular, and I believe he absolutely did with the three main tracks he composed for this game. Those being Get Enough, Da People, and the best song in the game, Jack the Funk. Get Enough served mainly as the trailer music for Bombrush, setting the stage for this game's bombastic style and a reaffirmation that the legacy of Jet Set Radio is not dead. Of course, it's not the game's actual main theme. That prospect probably goes to the stunning piece I Wanna Know by 2 Mello. Get Enough takes Naganuma back to the classics with his use of hard samples to intercut the main melody of the piece.
And rising to the top.
robotic voice in the song does a good job of signaling the robotic nature of the main character Red, or at least that's what it feels like to me. This track notably sounds a lot more techno with its bass and brass. The harmonics give off the vibe of a more energetic and jovial stroll through the city. As always, the breakdown towards the end of this piece fills you with all of the efficacy that you're used to by now. Hideki has just mastered the breakdown at this point, man. Can we all just agree on that? The percussion beats during this part especially are so exceptional. He's totally nailed that scatato-esque feel with the piano chords and the synths. And the song ends in the same bombastic flair that it started with, as always. Definitely a strong opener piece. In the track The People, Hideki goes back to his Jet Set Radio Future roots with another iconic sample from the same famous civil rights speech.
Wipe out of your mind the questions of minority. Wipe out of your mind the questions of technology. Wipe out of your mind. Wipe out of your mind. Wipe out of your mind the questions of technology. Wipe out of your mind.
Stokely Carmichael's voice is just so powerful and resonant. It really is an excellent choice to use for those powerful themes of rebellion and true strength through artistic expression. This song is divided into 3 main sections. The opener, where the slap bass guides in the main melody and motifs for the track. The electronic piano in combination makes for a very satisfying back and forth for the viewer to listen to. The use of another sample on the offbeats of the song are used to keep the adrenaline up throughout the entire piece, to great effect. The second section goes into the bridge, where the tempo slows down a bit, still keeping that funky beat, but it's clearly building up to something more potent. That's when the use of that second sample becomes even more frequent, and it eventually brings us to the last breakdown, the best part of the song. All you hear is Stokely Carmichael's beautiful voice as he says this beautiful race of people to the tune of the slap bass and electronic riffs. It nicely summarizes The People as a beautiful piece that calls on the spirit of the common folk to rebel against the common threat for the good of everyone. Just a great song. But unfortunately, in my opinion, Jack the Funk absolutely takes the cake and outdoes all of the songs in this game, and it's one of Naganuma's final pieces that he did for the game, and publicly in general. Seriously, that's his last YouTube upload before he seemingly disappeared from the internet. And boy, can I just say, I wouldn't have had it any other way. If this is truly Naganuma's final track that he will ever compose for the gaming industry, then man, what a way to go out with a bang. The song starts off with this powerful cowbell ringing in tandem to the perfect beat of the song, already screaming the funky edge that is about to come straight at you. This time, the first rhythms greet the player with a groovy electronic synth and nice mellow slap bass to bring you in. The samples in this song just pop in my ear, and they're immensely satisfying to hear. The amount of variety and cleanliness at which they are used just shows the amount of polish and craftsmanship that Hideki has fully perfected at this point in his life. As it goes into the main melody, you get these quick verses of the electronic voices talking in this smooth rhythm. The funkiness just keeps getting turned up to 11 as you keep on listening and hear the song literally state what it's going to do. It has all of the hallmarks of an amazing Naganuma classic. The breakdown of the main instrumentation towards the end of the song is used to exemplify his style. insane use of multiple samples this time around, way too many for me to count, and the final part of why this is the best song in the game is just the pure joy it makes me feel to listen to. Beyond all of the woodworks, from the amazing composition, the hidden narratives, and the absolutely stellar creativity in his music, Hideki Naganuma's songs are just fun to listen to. I'm constantly bobbing my head to every masterpiece this man creates, and I think that this level of consistency and uniqueness in his style should be praised to high heaven. What an amazing piece to go out on, and what an amazing game Bombrush Cyberfunk is. Everyone that worked on this game, thank you for sharing your art with the world, and once again, fueling that cycle of artistic expression once more.
Don't stop, cause get a fuck has got to beat the show shot. Get a fuck with me, but you don't stop, cause the squad has got to beat the show shot.
If there's one thing I absolutely want you to take away from this video, it's this. Naganuma really knows how to play that slap bass. No, but in all seriousness, I want you to leave with this message. If there's something out there that you think you might be good at, whether it be a talent of some sort in writing, making music, or hell, even game design, do it. Even if you're not good at it, even though you might suck, the hard work and passion that you put into that craft will always be as incredible and unique as the very DNA that runs through your cells. Naganuma was a man obsessed with music from a very young age, and that passion led him to create a genre of music that he can truly call his own. A style that draws from various aspects of life while still keeping the fun, frenetic energy of his own personal experiences, drawing inspiration from the greats and using their successes to refine and suit your own narrative. And finally, being willing to try out new things and constantly experiment with the skills and talents he already has, never settling for complacency and accepting stagnation. Hideki Naganuma has all of the hallmarks of a truly incredible musician, and of course, a great artist. His work on the gaming industry, and musical one, will not ever be forgotten as time goes on, because of the passion that once inspired him will pass on to new generations and continue that cycle till the ends of time. From his work at the revolutionary and subversive Sega, to the unimaginable work and variation he has taken abroad in the entertainment industry at large, Hideki Naganuma and his music have proven themselves to be worthy of the high praise and acclamation that it has garnered. I hope for all of you, over the course of this video, I have shown you the depth and importance of his work, the impact that he has undoubtedly left on the world, and the overall reason as to why I chose to analyze such a figure in the first place. There are many things that inspire me in this grand world of ours. Video games, anime, movies, TV shows, but I feel like what is overlooked the most in our everyday lives is the impact of music. Music has the power to change people's lives. It drives our emotions and feelings in this big scary world we interact with every day. It's quite possibly one of the most important aspects of human artistic expression. The music we listen to actively and fundamentally charges every emotional moment that we have in our daily human experience. And that is something I wish for you to gather from this video overall. Music is a powerful tool and medium to engage with, and so by engaging with this video, I hope that I have helped you fully understand the music of Hideki Naganuma.
どうでもいいことをつぶやいてたんですけど、もう最近はもう日本語でほぼつぶやかなくなって、逆に日本語でつぶやくとフォロワー減るみたいな感じですよね。外人さん読めないから。
フォローよろしくお願いいたします。こんなすごい、ゲームミュージックをね作る人が札幌にいるんだよというところで今日はご紹介させていただきました。今日のゲストはゲームミュージックコンポーザーの長沼秀樹さんでした。ありがとうございました。ありがとうございました。さよなら。さよなら。